long before the names America, New World, or even civilization entered human language. The continents of the Western Hemisphere already had a story unfolding quietly, patiently, shaped by forces older than memory. To understand America before Columbus, we must step far beyond the familiar dates of 1492, or even the earliest recorded histories. We must travel back into a world where the land itself was the storyteller, and humanity was only beginning to leave footprints upon it. The story begins at the end of the last ice age, more than 15,000 years ago. The world was colder then, locked in glaciers that stretched across continents. Oceans were lower, land bridges connected places now separated by water, and great animals, mammoths, giant bison, saber-toothed cats roamed freely. It was during this time that the first small groups of human beings reached the edges of what we now call the Americas. They were not explorers in the modern sense. They were families, travelers, and survivors. Following herds, following seasons, following instincts that had guided humanity for thousands of generations, they arrived in a land vast beyond imagination. Endless forests, untouched plains, towering mountains, and shimmering coasts welcomed them. For thousands of years, the early people moved slowly, gradually, spreading out like threads through a tapestry. They left behind traces, stone tools, ancient footprints, fragments of fire. But their world was mostly carried in memory and tradition, not in written words. These first Americans adapted to every environment they encountered. They learned the rhythms of rivers swollen with snowmelt, the migrations of animals, the cycles of plants, and the turning of seasons. Their knowledge was intimate, learned through observation, trial, and time. They understood which stones could become blades, which plants healed wounds, which forests whispered signs of approaching storms. Their connection to the land was not symbolic, it was survival itself. As centuries turned to millennia, communities grew, changed, and evolved. Different groups developed their own ways of life, shaped by the landscapes they inhabited. Along the coasts, they became skilled fishers and navigators. In the plains, they followed herds and learned the language of grass and sky. In forests, they built homes from bark and timber, and in deserts, they carved out life from the heat and sand. Each place taught something different. Each place shaped a distinct culture. This era, stretching over thousands of years, is often overlooked, overshadowed by later civilizations and dramatic events. But it was during this long, quiet age that the foundations of the Americas were laid. People began building tools that grew more refined. They began forming seasonal camps, gathering in larger groups, sharing stories, and passing down knowledge. Families became communities. Communities became traditions. Traditions became identities. By 6,000 years ago, something remarkable was happening. Across the continent, people were experimenting with early forms of agriculture. They began to plant seeds intentionally, noticing which plants grew strongest, which varieties survived drought, which ones gave the best harvest. Corn, one of the most influential crops in human history, was gradually transformed from a small wild grass into a reliable staple. This transformation took centuries of patient selection and skill. It was not an accident. It was science, practiced without laboratories, but with wisdom and care. These early farmers were shaping the future, sometimes without knowing it. Agriculture allowed populations to grow, settlements to become permanent, and ideas to spread more widely. Slowly, small villages emerged. Over time, these villages became centers of creativity and experimentation. People learned to store food, to craft new tools, to shape pottery, and to observe the sky with increasing precision. Yet, even as their societies grew more complex, the rhythm of life remained deeply connected to the natural world. Ceremonies honored the moon, the sun, the seasons, and the spirits believed to reside within rivers, animals, and mountains. The land was not seen as a resource to be exploited, but as a living partner, generous, powerful, and deserving of respect. By 4,000 years ago, the first monumental architecture began to appear. In places like the lower Mississippi Valley, people built enormous earthen mounds, geometric, aligned, purposeful, and sophisticated. These structures were older than the pyramids of Egypt, older than Stonehenge, and they marked the beginning of a new era in North American history. For the first time, human labor, organization, and vision were shaping the land on a massive scale. And yet, as these mound builders worked, other groups were carving different paths. In the Arctic, hunters adapted to icy worlds. In the Northwest, fishers mastered the power of rivers and salmon runs. In the Southwest, early ancestors of later Puebloan societies were learning to thrive in desert environments. Each region evolved independently, but all were connected by the same long human journey, one of adaptation, resilience, and ingenuity. For most of human history, this world existed in complete isolation from Europe, Africa, and Asia, not because the people lacked intelligence or curiosity, but because the oceans were immense and technology developed differently across continents. This isolation shaped the Americas into a world uniquely its own, a world with its own cultures, sciences, languages, and philosophies. This is the deep beginning of America before Columbus, a continent filled with life, shaped by human hands long before anyone from Europe set foot here. A place of quiet innovation, deep roots, and ancient traditions that would one day blossom into cities, trade networks, and civilizations whose achievements still stand as wonder today. The story continues not with sudden leaps, but with steady, patient growth. A story written not in books, but in earth, stone, and memory. A story thousands of years older than the one most of us were taught. And this is only the beginning. If you'd like to continue exploring the true stories of the past, consider subscribing. It helps support more in-depth documentaries like this, and it's a simple way to stay connected as we uncover the history behind the history. As the millennia unfolded and the first seeds of civilization quietly took root, the landscapes of the Americas began to echo with new human patterns. Villages expanded, traditions grew more intricate, and across vast distances, through forests, rivers, valleys, and plains, cultures began to shape identities that would leave lasting impressions on the continent. By around 4,000 years ago, a remarkable transformation was underway. People were no longer living only as nomadic hunters or small bands of gatherers. Farming communities had formed, and as populations grew, societies began to organize themselves in ways that allowed architecture, culture, and ceremony to deepen. This was the dawn of the first great cultural eras. Let us begin in the eastern woodlands of what is now the United States. Here, the people of the Archaic period had already learned to thrive in a diverse environment: dense forests, wide rivers, abundant wildlife. By 3000 BCE, they began shaping earthen mounds for ceremonial and communal purposes. These early mound sites, such as Watson Brake in modern-day Louisiana, reveal something extraordinary: organized labor, shared purpose, and a vision that extended beyond daily survival. No kings demanded their construction. No armies supervised the work. Instead, these structures were built by communities, reflecting shared beliefs and values. These early ceremonial centers were modest compared to what would come later, but they were foundational. They represented a turning point, a shift from temporary shelters to permanent expressions of culture, memory, and identity. Over time, these traditions grew. Larger mounds appeared. New shapes emerged: circles, squares, complex ridges, and platforms, each one carefully designed, aligned, and shaped by human hands. As centuries passed, these early mound-building traditions evolved into more sophisticated cultures. One of the earliest and most influential of these was the Adena culture. Flourishing around 1000 BCE, the Adena people built conical mounds, created intricate ornaments from copper and stone, and developed ceremonial practices that would shape the future of the region. Their burial mounds were not just graves, they were monuments, layered with symbolism, representing respect for ancestors and continuity across generations. From the Adena emerged another powerful tradition: the Hopewell culture, flourishing around 200 BCE to 500 CE. Hopewell societies extended across the Midwest and East, connecting distant communities through trade, ritual, and shared ideas. They constructed geometric earthworks with astonishing precision, circles and squares tens of thousands of feet across, aligned with celestial events. These designs reveal a deep understanding of mathematics and astronomy long before such knowledge was acknowledged in the Americas. The Hopewell trade network stretched for thousands of miles: obsidian from the Rocky Mountains, mica from the Appalachians, copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf Coast. These materials were not ordinary items. They were symbols of connection, brought together by people who traveled, communicated, and exchanged knowledge across vast distances. The Hopewell people did not build cities, but they built a cultural world, rich with spirituality, artistry, and science. Meanwhile, far to the south in the deserts of the American Southwest, another great tradition was forming. Between 300 BCE and 1500 CE, the ancestors of the Hohokam engineered one of the most advanced irrigation systems in ancient America. In the harsh heat of modern Arizona, they carved canals miles long, guiding river water into fields that supported large settlements. Their networks transformed deserts into gardens, sustaining thriving communities for centuries. They built ball courts, platform mounds, and extensive villages. Their pottery and crafts reveal distinct styles and influences that connect them to cultures thousands of miles away. Through trade and shared innovation, the Hohokam were part of a wider world, one shaped by ideas flowing across the continent. In the same region, the ancestral Puebloans, often called the Anasazi, began constructing early settlements. Their cliff dwellings, such as those found at Mesa Verde, and their great houses in Chaco Canyon, represent some of the most sophisticated architecture in ancient North America. Chaco Canyon, with its multi-story stone structures and astronomical alignments, functioned as a regional center for ritual, trade, and communal gatherings. Its design was deliberate, guided by observation of the sun, the moon, and the changing seasons. These achievements were part of a broader cultural evolution, each society shaped by geography, climate, and tradition. And yet, across all these developments, the guiding thread remained the same: human beings responding to their environment with ingenuity, creativity, and cooperation. But the rise of the great cultures was not limited to the north, south of the present-day U.S. border. The foundations of even larger civilizations were forming societies that would one day build cities, write languages, and leave records carved in stone. Still, before we reach the Maya, the Olmec, the Zapotec, and the Inca, we must understand a simple but profound truth. The Americas did not develop in isolation from one another. Ideas moved, people traveled, stories spread, knowledge was shared. Though there were thousands of independent groups, they were connected by invisible threads: geography, trade, migration, and time. By the time Columbus set sail across the Atlantic, the Americas had already lived through more than 10,000 years of human adaptation, cooperation, and cultural growth. The land was not empty. It was not waiting to be discovered. It was alive with memory carved into mounds, recorded in stone, carried in traditions, and held in the minds of countless generations. And what these early cultures created laid the groundwork for something even greater: the rise of true civilizations. Vast, complex societies with cities, writing systems, astronomy, agriculture, and monumental architecture that would stand for millennia. Their story begins in the next chapter. By the turn of the first millennium CE, the landscapes of North and Central America had already witnessed a remarkable transformation. Small villages had grown into larger settlements, seasonal camps had become permanent communities, and the rise of monumental architecture marked a new stage in the evolution of human organization, a stage that demanded planning, cooperation, and vision stretching far beyond the immediate horizon. In the Mississippi Valley, the city of Cahokia rose as the preeminent urban center of its time. By 1050 CE, its population may have exceeded 20,000 people, making it larger than many European cities of the same period. The city's layout was precise, with massive plazas, ceremonial mounds, residential neighborhoods, and public gathering spaces. The largest of these, Monk's Mound, towers over the landscape even today, a testament to human ambition, organization, and skill. The construction required coordinated labor, a shared vision, and long-term planning. Cahokia was not a fleeting village, it was a capital, a cultural center, and a hub for innovation, religion, and trade. The Mississippian people built their society around agriculture, particularly corn, beans, and squash. This stable food supply supported population growth and allowed individuals to specialize in different crafts. Artisans produced copper tools, engraved shells, and pottery of extraordinary quality. Traders moved goods across hundreds of miles, connecting Cahokia to distant communities. This network was not only material, it was social and cultural. Ideas, rituals, and knowledge traveled along these invisible pathways, weaving together a continent in ways that many modern observers would not recognize. Far to the southwest, the ancestral Puebloans continued their monumental architectural achievements. Chaco Canyon, a desert city of stone and timber, exemplified ingenuity on a continental scale. Its structures were precisely aligned to solar and lunar events, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of astronomy. Roads radiated outward from the city, connecting distant settlements over vast distances. Water management systems, including reservoirs and canals, supported agriculture in an arid climate. Chaco Canyon was not merely a city. It was a symbol of human adaptation, observation, and cultural cohesion. Simultaneously, in Mesoamerica, civilizations were flourishing in ways that rivaled anything in the Old World. The Olmec civilization, often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, developed early forms of writing, monumental stone heads, and complex religious practices. Their influence spread to distant regions, shaping societies that would follow, including the Maya and the Zapotec. Cities like San Lorenzo and La Venta showcased urban planning, ceremonial centers, and social hierarchies, evidence of governance and civic organization far earlier than many realize. Trade networks in these regions extended across hundreds, sometimes thousands, of miles. Obsidian from volcanic regions, jade from distant mountains, shells from the coasts, all traveled great distances. These networks facilitated not only commerce, but also cultural exchange. Art, religious ideas, and technological innovations spread through these systems, connecting disparate groups into larger, interconnected worlds. The Maya civilization, rising around 250 CE, brought a new level of sophistication. They developed intricate calendar systems, hieroglyphic writing, and monumental cities such as Tikal, Copan, and Palenque. Their pyramids, palaces, and ball courts were centers of both administration and religion. Astronomy played a central role in Maya life, influencing agriculture, ceremonial timing, and political decisions. Their mathematics, including the concept of zero, was unparalleled at the time. In the Andean regions of South America, early societies were laying the foundations for what would eventually become the Inca Empire. Complex agricultural terraces carved into mountainsides, advanced irrigation systems, and stone constructions demonstrated remarkable engineering skill. These civilizations thrived in diverse environments, from coastal deserts to high-altitude plateaus, showing an extraordinary capacity to adapt, innovate, and organize. Even beyond these great civilizations, smaller societies flourished across North America. The Mississippians, Puebloans, and various woodland cultures maintained connections through shared rituals, trade, and cultural exchange. Along rivers and coasts, people navigated vast distances in canoes, facilitating communication and commerce. Societies were not isolated islands. They were threads in a continental tapestry. This era teaches a profound lesson. Long before European contact, the Americas were home to cities, agriculture, science, and sophisticated social organization. The land was not a blank canvas waiting to be discovered. It was already alive with human ingenuity, cultural complexity, and centuries of cumulative knowledge. As Columbus prepared to cross the Atlantic in 1492, the continents he would encounter were already thriving with history. These civilizations were older, larger, and more advanced than most modern textbooks acknowledge. Their achievements, though often overlooked, form the foundation of a human story that continues to influence life in the Americas today. And yet, even as these societies rose, they faced challenges: climate shifts, resource pressures, and conflicts both internal and external. These challenges would shape migration, adaptation, and cultural transformation, preparing the stage for the next chapter in the unfolding history of the Americas. As the centuries passed, the societies of the Americas became increasingly interconnected not only through trade of goods, but through the exchange of ideas, rituals, and knowledge. The continent was not a collection of isolated communities. It was a vast, intricate network of human activity, each culture learning from, influencing, and responding to others. In the Mississippi Valley, the Mississippian culture perfected the art of mound building and urban planning. Cahokia, Monk's Mound, and surrounding ceremonial centers became hubs of political, spiritual, and social life. Artifacts from distant regions, copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf Coast, mica from the Appalachians attest to a sophisticated system of trade and communication. These networks were not casual or incidental. They were deliberate, structured, and carefully maintained over generations. Meanwhile, in the American Southwest, the ancestral Puebloans refined their urban designs. Roads extending from Chaco Canyon connected outlying communities over dozens of miles, allowing the transfer of goods, ideas, and ceremonial practices. Their architectural alignments reveal careful observation of celestial cycles, an understanding of astronomy applied to both agriculture and religion. These societies recognized the patterns of the cosmos and aligned their lives with them, integrating science, spirituality, and culture into daily life. Further south, the Olmec civilization laid the foundations for Mesoamerican innovation. Their monumental stone heads, ceremonial platforms, and intricate iconography illustrate not only artistic skill, but a highly organized social structure capable of mobilizing resources for large-scale projects. Olmec influence reached far beyond their core region, seeding developments that would emerge centuries later in the Maya, Zapotec, and other civilizations. The Maya civilization itself demonstrates the heights of pre-Columbian achievement. Cities like Tikal and Palenque were centers of administration, education, and religion. Scholars developed complex calendars, tracked celestial movements, and recorded historical events in hieroglyphic texts. Mathematics, including the concept of zero, allowed them to calculate eclipses and predict seasonal cycles with astonishing precision. This was science, applied and advanced in ways that rivaled contemporary societies in Europe and Asia. Across the Andes, early Andean societies experimented with terrace farming, irrigation, and road construction that would eventually support the Inca Empire. These agricultural innovations allowed dense populations to thrive in challenging mountainous terrain. Social hierarchies, administrative systems, and religious practices were intricately organized, revealing a sophisticated understanding of governance and human resources. Even smaller communities contributed to the broader network of knowledge. Indigenous peoples across North America along the Pacific coast, in the Great Plains, in the eastern woodlands, maintained traditions of storytelling, medicine, and survival techniques. Observations of plant cycles, animal behavior, and environmental patterns were recorded orally, passed through generations, and shaped long-term strategies for living sustainably on the land. Religion and ritual played a central role in uniting these societies. Ceremonial sites, often aligned with astronomical phenomena, acted as centers for community gatherings, trade fairs, and spiritual observances. Sacred spaces were not merely places of worship. They were hubs of information exchange, education, and leadership. Spiritual practices reinforced social cohesion, maintained cultural memory, and guided decision-making in agriculture, warfare, and governance. Trade and cultural exchange extended far beyond what many modern scholars once imagined. Artifacts traveled hundreds, even thousands, of miles. Ideas about agriculture, ritual, architecture, and governance flowed along these networks. The Americas, in this sense, were a continent of innovation, adaptation, and collaboration long before any European maps labeled the lands. By the time European explorers arrived, these networks had already endured for millennia. They were not fragile. They were resilient, deeply embedded in the social, economic, and spiritual fabric of the continent. The intricate knowledge systems, combined with monumental architecture and sophisticated urban planning, paint a picture of the Americas as a place of extraordinary human achievement, dynamic, diverse, and alive with culture. Understanding these networks and achievements forces us to reconsider the narrative of discovery. When Columbus arrived, he did not find an empty land. He encountered a continent rich with civilizations, each with its own history, knowledge, and accomplishments. The Americas had been home to advanced societies for thousands of years, societies that had built cities, mastered agriculture, conducted long-distance trade, and observed the movements of the stars. This chapter of history reminds us that the story of America is not linear. It is not a simple tale of discovery and conquest. It is a complex tapestry of human endeavor, adaptation, and achievement woven over millennia by people whose lives, ideas, and accomplishments continue to resonate today. And as we move into the next chapter, we will explore how these civilizations adapted to climate shifts, migration pressures, and internal forces that would shape the rise and fall of cities and cultures long before European arrival. Even the most advanced societies are not immune to change. Across the Americas, civilizations that had flourished for centuries faced constant pressures from the environment, from population growth, and from internal and external conflict. Understanding these challenges is essential to appreciating how these cultures adapted, evolved, and in some cases, disappeared. Climate shifts played a significant role. Prolonged droughts in the Southwest forced the ancestral Puebloans to reconsider settlement patterns. Fields dried up, water sources diminished, and communities were often compelled to relocate. These migrations were not chaotic. They were careful, deliberate responses to environmental stress, demonstrating a deep understanding of land management and human resilience. Puebloan society endured by dispersing, reforming, and preserving knowledge even as villages were abandoned. Similarly, in the Mississippi Valley, changing river courses and flooding patterns influenced the growth and decline of mound-building communities. Cahokia, the largest urban center of its time, faced ecological pressures, including deforestation, soil depletion, and periodic flooding. Archaeologists believe that these factors, combined with social tensions, may have contributed to the city's gradual decline by the 13th century. Yet, even in decline, the cultural and technological achievements of Cahokia persisted, influencing surrounding regions for generations. Migration was a recurring theme across the continent. Populations moved in response to resource availability, climate, and trade opportunities. These movements facilitated cultural exchange, spreading technologies, agricultural practices, and rituals across vast distances. Societies were not static. They were fluid, adaptable, and interconnected, constantly responding to new challenges while preserving core traditions. Conflict, too, shaped history. Competition for land, resources, and political influence sometimes erupted into warfare, though archaeological evidence suggests that these conflicts were often localized rather than continental in scale. Fortifications, weapons, and ceremonial burials indicate both defense strategies and symbolic displays of power. Yet even in conflict, trade, and cultural exchange continued, demonstrating a balance between rivalry and cooperation that characterized many pre-Columbian societies. In Mesoamerica, the Olmec, Maya, and Zapotec civilizations faced similar pressures. Cities were built, expanded, and sometimes abandoned, influenced by environmental conditions, population shifts, and political dynamics. The Maya, for example, experienced cycles of urban growth and decline in response to drought, overpopulation, and resource management challenges. Even as cities declined, knowledge, religious practices, and technological innovation persisted and spread to other regions. Agriculture itself presented both opportunity and challenge. Dependence on staple crops required careful management of soil, water, and planting cycles. Crop failures could threaten entire communities, necessitating trade, adaptation, and innovation. This intimate relationship with the land fostered sophisticated ecological knowledge and agricultural techniques, from irrigation canals in the southwest to terraced mountainsides in the Andes. Despite these pressures, cultures endured. Knowledge was preserved through oral traditions, ritual practices, and material culture. Artifacts, mounds, and city layouts provide evidence of resilience and ingenuity. Even abandoned sites tell stories not of failure, but of adaptation, innovation, and survival across generations. Trade and migration were critical to this resilience. Communities relied on connections with distant groups to secure resources they could not produce locally. Obsidian, shells, copper, and exotic stones moved across hundreds or even thousands of miles. Ideas and religious practices spread alongside goods, creating a web of interdependence that helped societies survive environmental and social challenges. Understanding these transformations provides a broader perspective on pre-Columbian America. It challenges the notion of lost civilizations as simply vanished. Instead, it reveals societies that were dynamic, responsive, and deeply intelligent, capable of adaptation over centuries. Their decline, where it occurred, was rarely sudden. It was a process shaped by multiple factors interacting over long periods of time. By the time Europeans arrived, the continent was a patchwork of thriving, resilient societies. The landscapes they encountered were not empty, but filled with knowledge, history, and achievement. Cities, ceremonial centers, trade networks, and agricultural systems bore witness to millennia of human endeavor. This chapter of history teaches a profound lesson. Human ingenuity and resilience have always been central to survival. Societies respond, adapt, and transform in the face of challenges. And in the Americas, these processes had been unfolding for thousands of years, long before any European footprint marked the land. The story continues. In the next chapter, we will examine the cultural and technological peaks of pre-Columbian societies, exploring their innovations, artistry, governance, and spiritual practices that would leave lasting legacies across the continent. By the first millennium CE, pre-Columbian societies had reached remarkable levels of sophistication, both in their material achievements and in the ways they organized human life. From North America to Mesoamerica, communities developed governance structures, social hierarchies, and cultural systems that balanced daily survival with spiritual, ceremonial, and civic needs. In the eastern woodlands, the Mississippian culture exemplified structured governance. Leaders coordinated construction of monumental mounds, organized large-scale ceremonies, and maintained trade networks stretching hundreds of miles. Decision-making combined authority with communal input, balancing power with social cohesion. Religion, politics, and economy were intertwined, reflecting an integrated worldview. In the American Southwest, the ancestral Puebloans demonstrated architectural genius and technological mastery. Multi-story cliff dwellings and intricate water management systems reflected advanced planning, engineering, and an understanding of their environment. Astronomy influenced city layouts, ceremonial calendars, and agricultural practices, showing that science and spirituality were inseparable. Across Mesoamerica, the Maya and Olmec civilizations created complex political systems. Maya city-states were governed by elite families and councils, supported by scribes, artisans, and farmers. Their hieroglyphic writing preserved history, recorded astronomical observations, and guided religious practice. Monumental architecture symbolized both spiritual and political power, reminding citizens of their place in the cosmos and the social order. In the Andes, early societies developed advanced engineering techniques to farm mountainsides, transport water, and construct durable settlements. These technologies allowed dense populations to thrive in challenging terrain and laid the foundation for the later Inca Empire. Agricultural terraces, irrigation channels, and road networks were not only practical, they represented a profound understanding of environmental engineering. Art, music, and storytelling were essential to every society. Carvings, pottery, textiles, and ceremonial objects communicated values, myths, and histories across generations. Oral traditions preserved the collective memory of communities, connecting the past to the present in ways that written documents often cannot. Trade, communication, and cultural exchange created a continental web. Goods, ideas, and rituals moved along established networks, fostering cooperation, innovation, and shared identity. Societies adapted technologies from neighbors, incorporated foreign ideas into local traditions, and continuously evolved, demonstrating that pre-Columbian America was dynamic and interconnected. By the late 15th century, the Americas had been home to flourishing civilizations for thousands of years. And then came a moment that would forever change the continent: the arrival of European explorers. Columbus, and those who followed, stepped onto lands already inhabited, organized, and sophisticated. Yet the stories that reached Europe were often filtered, misinterpreted, or mythologized, creating a skewed narrative that still lingers today. Contrary to popular belief, Columbus did not discover America. People had been living, farming, building cities, and observing the stars across the continent for millennia. Indigenous civilizations were deeply connected to their environments and each other. Their societies were diverse, innovative, and resilient. Yet, European accounts often portrayed the land as empty or uncultivated, a misrepresentation shaped by colonial interests. Early interactions were complex. In some areas, initial contact involved trade, curiosity, and cautious diplomacy. Indigenous people shared knowledge of local resources, navigation routes, and agricultural techniques. In return, Europeans introduced new tools, metal goods, and sometimes diseases that would have catastrophic consequences. These early exchanges were fraught with misunderstanding, cultural differences, and, eventually, exploitation. The myths surrounding Columbus also overshadow the realities of what occurred. Legends of untouched wilderness ignore the dense urban centers, cultivated fields, and long-established trade networks that Europeans encountered. Tales of savage tribes erase centuries of cultural sophistication and spiritual practice. By separating myth from reality, we begin to recognize the depth, intelligence, and achievements of pre-Columbian peoples. Disease played a pivotal and tragic role in reshaping the continent. Europeans unintentionally introduced pathogens to which indigenous populations had no immunity. Epidemics spread rapidly, sometimes wiping out entire communities, long before sustained military conquest occurred. These losses were devastating. Yet they were not the result of cultural inferiority. They were the consequence of biological vulnerability in the face of unprecedented contact. Despite these disruptions, indigenous societies adapted. Knowledge of agriculture, construction, governance, and trade persisted. Survivors carried traditions forward, preserving languages, rituals, and stories that continue to shape cultures today. The resilience of these societies in the face of dramatic change is a testament to human ingenuity and cultural endurance. This chapter challenges the simple narrative of European discovery and highlights the necessity of understanding history from multiple perspectives. Recognizing the depth of pre-Columbian civilizations allows us to see the Americas as a vibrant, complex world, a world that existed long before European influence and continues to inform identity, culture, and scholarship today. In the next chapter, we will explore how indigenous cultures preserved knowledge, resisted erasure, and influenced the emerging Americas, showing that history is not just what was written by colonizers, but what survived through memory, tradition, and adaptation. Even after the arrival of Europeans and the profound disruptions that followed, the indigenous peoples of the Americas demonstrated remarkable resilience. Societies that had endured for thousands of years adapted to new realities while preserving core elements of their culture, knowledge, and identity. In the Mississippi Valley, descendants of the Mississippian peoples continued to inhabit the land, maintaining traditions of agriculture, mound building, and governance. While large urban centers like Cahokia declined, knowledge of farming techniques, trade, and community organization survived. These practices influenced neighboring societies and contributed to a continuous cultural thread across centuries. In the Southwest, the Pueblo peoples adapted to both environmental challenges and new social pressures. Their architectural and agricultural innovations endured, forming the foundation for communities that exist to this day. Water management, terracing, and crop rotation ensured survival in harsh climates, while ceremonial practices preserved spiritual and social cohesion. Across Mesoamerica, Maya, Zapotec, and other civilizations faced upheaval, but retained essential cultural frameworks. Knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and writing was preserved in codices, oral traditions, and monuments. While political centers rose and fell, the intellectual and spiritual legacy persisted, influencing subsequent generations and modern understanding of pre-Columbian science and art. Trade networks also persisted, though altered by changing political and social landscapes. Even in areas disrupted by European contact, indigenous communities maintained connections, sharing resources, knowledge, and techniques. These networks fostered cultural continuity and reinforced a sense of identity rooted in history and shared experience. Survival was not only practical but cultural. Storytelling, rituals, music, and art acted as vessels for memory, preserving histories that were not recorded in European texts. These traditions ensured that knowledge of ancestral achievements, cosmology, and social structure survived, allowing contemporary societies to reclaim and reinterpret their past. The legacy of pre-Columbian civilizations is evident today, in the continuity of language, agriculture, art, governance, and spiritual practice. From the terraced fields of the Andes to the ceremonial mounds of North America, the ingenuity, resilience, and creativity of these peoples continue to shape the Americas. This chapter reminds us that history is not static. It survives through adaptation, memory, and cultural practice. Despite profound disruption, indigenous peoples preserved and transmitted knowledge, ensuring that the story of the Americas did not end with European arrival. As we move to the next chapter, we will examine archaeological discoveries, forgotten histories, and modern recognition, uncovering the evidence that restores pre-Columbian America to its rightful place in history. For centuries, the achievements of pre-Columbian civilizations were overlooked, dismissed, or misrepresented. Early European narratives often minimized indigenous accomplishments, creating the false impression that the Americas were uncultivated or primitive. It is only through modern archaeology, anthropology, and indigenous scholarship that the depth of these societies has been fully revealed. Excavations of mound sites across North America, from Cahokia to Poverty Point, have uncovered evidence of advanced urban planning, trade, and ceremonial practices. Researchers have discovered tools, pottery, ornaments, and remains that speak to sophisticated craftsmanship, social organization, and spiritual life. These findings challenge outdated assumptions and provide a tangible connection to people whose stories were nearly erased. In Mesoamerica, the rediscovery of Maya cities such as Tikal, Copan, and Palenque has transformed our understanding of ancient urbanism, astronomy, and governance. Scholars have decoded hieroglyphs, reconstructed calendars, and mapped monumental architecture, revealing societies that rivaled contemporary civilizations in Europe, Africa, and Asia. The Maya were not isolated, they were scientific, artistic, and highly organized. Even in the Andean region, archaeological work has uncovered complex terracing, irrigation systems, and road networks that facilitated trade and agriculture in challenging terrain. These discoveries demonstrate an understanding of engineering, environmental management, and social coordination that is astonishing by any standard. Modern recognition of pre-Columbian achievements is also reinforced by indigenous voices themselves. Oral histories, cultural preservation, and scholarly work from native communities ensure that the narrative is not solely written by outsiders. This collaboration between archaeology and indigenous knowledge restores context, meaning, and dignity to civilizations that endured despite immense disruption. By piecing together artifacts, structures, and oral traditions, scholars now see a full picture of pre-Columbian America. It is a landscape of innovation, resilience, and diversity, an intricate mosaic of interconnected societies. Each mound, terrace, and city is a testament to the ingenuity of human beings who shaped the land over millennia. The work of uncovering these histories is ongoing. Every excavation, every recovered artifact, and every analyzed record adds depth to our understanding, revealing how indigenous peoples influenced agriculture, trade, science, and culture across the continent. Recognition of these civilizations is not just academic, it is a correction of historical oversight and a reclamation of identity. This chapter reminds us that history is not fixed. It evolves as we discover more evidence, challenge assumptions, and listen to the voices of those whose stories were suppressed. The Americas before Columbus were rich with culture, achievement, and knowledge, and modern scholarship continues to bring this truth to light. As we approach the final chapter, we will reflect on the lessons, legacies, and enduring significance of pre-Columbian civilizations, honoring the full story of the Americas. As we reach the conclusion of this journey through time, it becomes clear that the history of the Americas extends far beyond what most textbooks teach. For thousands of years before European arrival, the continents were alive with human ingenuity, cultural richness, and profound knowledge. Societies adapted to their environments, built cities, managed resources, created art, developed mathematics and astronomy, and fostered trade networks that spanned hundreds of miles. The legacy of these civilizations is not confined to the past. It continues in the traditions, languages, and cultural practices of indigenous peoples today. Corn, potatoes, beans, and countless other crops cultivated millennia ago remain staples of the world's diet. Architectural techniques, agricultural innovations, and scientific knowledge echo in modern life, reminding us that the past shapes the present. Modern archaeology, anthropology, and indigenous scholarship have begun to restore these stories. Monumental sites, artifacts, oral histories, and environmental evidence reveal a continent teeming with civilization, science, art, and spirituality. The Americas were never empty. They were a place of continuity, resilience, and achievement, where human creativity thrived long before the first Europeans arrived. Reflecting on this history, one realizes that the story of the Americas is not simply one of conquest, colonization, or discovery. It is a story of human ingenuity, adaptation, and endurance. It is a story of civilizations that rose, transformed, and left enduring legacies, often under conditions of profound challenge and change. By acknowledging this history, we honor the people who came before, recognize the depth of their achievements, and ensure that their contributions are not forgotten. Pre-Columbian civilizations were complex, connected, and enduring. They remind us that history is broader, richer, and more nuanced than often portrayed. In conclusion, the Americas before Columbus were a world of extraordinary human endeavor, a world of cities, trade, science, governance, and spiritual depth. Understanding this past gives context to the present, strengthens cultural identity, and challenges us to appreciate the true scale of human achievement. As we look forward, the lesson is clear. To understand a land, we must understand its people. Not just those who arrived later, but those who lived, innovated, and flourished across millennia. The story of pre-Columbian America is not only a story of the past, it is a living legacy, inviting us to explore, learn, and reflect on the vast tapestry of human history that came before us. If you've joined us on this journey, you've glimpsed just a fraction of the depth, resilience, and brilliance of the Americas before Columbus. The past continues to speak, waiting for those who are willing to listen. Consider subscribing. It helps support more in-depth documentaries like this, and it's a simple way to stay connected as we uncover the history behind the history.